This is the Other 22 Hours podcast. Hey, and welcome to this week's episode of the Other 22 Hours podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Shafer-Haiss.
And I'm your other host, Michaela Anne, and we are on episode 106. And this week we're featuring our conversation with Wilder Woods.
Yeah, Wilder Woods, a.k.a. Bear Rinehart. He is best known, you could say, as the lead singer for arena rock band Need to Breathe. They are Grammy-nominated, Billboard award-winning, multi-platinum selling, massive 3-bus rock band that Bear started with his brother and started releasing records in 2001. And then he kind of realized that he was writing songs that he loved that didn't fit Need to Breathe. And so he started his solo project, Wilder Woods, in 2019, releasing the first record on Atlantic. And now he's on record number 3.
Yeah, and it was really interesting to talk to him. He is a prolific writer, so it makes sense that he needed to have a second outlet. He said he sometimes writes upwards of 150 songs per year. So his frustration is sometimes, how do I get all of these songs out and share? So even 2 projects probably isn't enough, but there's not enough time in the day or year.
Yeah, wild. On top of talking about his abundance of output, we talked a lot about enjoying the process and the journey in your career, in your trajectory as an artist, and enjoying that for what it is and for what is happening, not what you want it to be and what your expectations were, because you might be missing out on some pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah, we covered being intentional about where you want your music to be presented, especially coming from his perspective, having this arena rock band and more of a kind of singer-songwriter project, and how the setting, the stage, the venue, all of those things are really thought through on his end. As far as like what color the walls are of the venue and if there's parking for his audience, amazing things to think about that I wish a lot more people thought about.
As always, some of the topics that we touch on in this conversation come from suggestions from our Patreons. That's because they get advance notice of our guests and they can submit questions. We have discussions on topics that we touch on in these conversations. We have an ever-evolving, expanding, contracting, shifting, changing landscape over there, all with the idea of getting deeper into what we talk about here and furthering a community and hoping that a rising tide raises all ships. If that sounds intriguing to you, there is a link below in our show notes.
And if you are a visual person, this conversation and all previous conversations are also on our YouTube page. You can go visit that.
And I am definitely in newborn life and in need of a haircut. So if you need a good laugh, check out the YouTube.
Yeah, don't judge the bags under our eyes when we have a 1-month-old baby.
We're doing our best here. So with that, here's our conversation with Wilder Woods.
Nice to meet you. I'm Michaela and this is Aaron.
Nice to meet y'all.
Just to start off, I know you're in the midst of promoting a new record, but where are you today physically and also like creatively?
Yeah, we're 2 weeks, I guess, into the tour, Wilder Woods tour. I've got 3 kids, so the days off, we're trying to do like every other weekend warrior kind of thing. So it's like, a 10-day split and then home for 3. So I'm in the middle of the home thing. It's probably less creative in these gaps. I always feel like I've got to catch up with the boys. The oldest are playing baseball and all that stuff. So today I have, I think, 3 practices to go to. So.
Oh my gosh.
So feel a little, this is the second day at home. The first day is totally, like you're trying to make it work and be dad and everything, but you're kind of a wreck.
Yeah.
But no, good. I feel good. My wife came out for the last 3, which is always a huge thing for me.
Nice.
She works full time. She's a nurse practitioner and does mental health side of stuff. Works with artists actually a lot.
Oh, amazing.
So it makes it tough for her to come out when I'm on these. So I feel like, it's a total game changer for me to have her out, every couple of weeks at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little point of grounding, a little point of home and like real life.
That in-between time too, like when you're like, oh, it's a day off, but when you have kids, it's not a day off. Like you're probably getting less rest than when you're on tour. Like,
yeah. It's different. It's certainly different. I think my wife is, we've been together over 20 years. So she's kind of been through the whole, gamut of the thing. And I think our sort of on-ramp, off-ramp understanding and sort of expectations and all that are just light years ahead of where they used to be. You're always sort of checking in, like what kind of percentage are you at coming in, which is very helpful to me because I think both of us feel this is not an overwhelming time for sure, but we have them all the time.
Yeah.
So I think coming in off a tour like that, it's just like the expectations are high for you to kind of jump right in. You know, we got a 4-year-old, so that they're up at whatever 5:30, ready to like rock and roll.
Oh yeah.
That's just, the schedule flip and the whole thing. But no, we're feeling good right now.
Nice.
That's really helpful language of like checking in. What percentage are you at to kind of like really negotiate and communicate for both people, like the person who's been home as well as the person coming home for that reentry and like how much you can manage. I just remember in September, I was on tour. I had like a 3-week stretch and I had one day off. And I was 6 months pregnant. It was really important to me that I spend the day with our 3-year-old because I was feeling so guilty about being away. I just remember being so exhausted and like taking her on a walk in the neighborhood with her tricycle, which of course she stopped wanting to ride. And then a well-intended neighbor gave us like a crate of cupcakes. And I'm just like, end up walking through the neighborhood with my daughter on my back, a tricycle in my arm and a cupcake in my other hand. And I'm 6 months pregnant. And I was like, this is not,
It's too much.
this is not restful.
Yeah,
Give me a load in. I'd rather do
yeah,
that.
totally. I feel that.
And also just what percentage you're at, like setting the expectations. You know what I mean? Because like we're always trying our best. And sometimes you can be given it 100%, but if you're only at 70% to begin with,
I feel as we're talking about this, it's like I sound like we have these plans and things put together, which obviously you do, but just things happen and it just gets out of whack and then, it's overwhelming. But I think that thing of expectations is like a huge deal with us in terms of, we started probably 4 or 5 years ago doing goals together. So kind of talk out the year and the schedule and spend a day going like, okay, what are we going to do and what are we not going to do? What's not on the priority list this year? And I think that's helpful, obviously, to kind of have at least an overview at the top to go back to and be like, we said that this was going to be tough. And so like, let's ease up on that. And she's great with being from the mental health side. I think she can check in with me and know where I'm at, what I'm capable of. So that's super helpful. But it sounds like, it's easy, but it obviously isn't. Last year was a too much year. You know how it goes, like you schedule these things like 6 months, 8 months out or whatever it is. And the manager catches you on a good day. It's like, what do you think about this? What do you think? And it's like, it's such a minuscule detail to you at that time. You don't realize you're actually physically going to be there for those days or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it was one of those that caught me. I think we did over 100 shows and we did Europe and Canada and all that. And she was finishing school. She'd gone back to school for something and it was just chaos. It was one of those, like, not falling apart. Like, we kind of all knew the chaos was coming, but just like once you're in it, it's hard to manage.
When we hit those situations, it's like, we're in it and it's like, oh, this is real and it's a struggle. And the only way through it is just to keep going. You can't backpedal because then you're just going to have to start again. So it's
totally.
All right, here we are. Grit your teeth and have at it. We had Lori McKenna on here and how she approaches those, when her manager, whoever throws out something that's 6 or 8 months away, she tries to envision, okay, what if this is 3 days from now? Could I do this if it was 3 days from now? And it's like,
smart.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I don't, but
I know it really is based on my mood when they call, It's like, it's so crazy to think it's like that. But you catch yourself many times be like, I cannot believe I said yes to this. Like, we have this one day off. You think you could fly to there? And it's all that kind of stuff, that adds up. So, but I'm working on it.
Well, and especially when like even the things that would be like a good opportunity or a good experience that you're like, oh yeah, that sounds great. And then the reality sets in of like, that is great, but I also have to take a flight at this schedule. I'm going to be without sleep and I'm going to be schlepping this and, all of that stuff that's hard to process, especially when so many things in this business feel like, well, just hurry up and make a decision or like you have to say yes or no soon. You can't like mull this over. But obviously having a family, there's so much more to consider and then a partner to talk things through with. But I also think even like creatively knowing that, okay, this is crazy right now and we don't have time for these things in life, but like maintaining our sanity by reminding ourselves and each other, like that will come back. There will be times where I'll be like itching to go on tour and nothing will be happening. Or there will be times where like I have lots of time to write. I think of that a lot in creativity of like, and I'm curious how that works for you of like seasons of writing or if you're always writing or, especially when you're just maxed out and there's no time, how that feels emotionally for you.
I'd like to think that I can write all the time, but the truth is I don't. And I think mainly on the road, like those first couple of weeks getting a tour going, that's always, it takes up too much of the mind space to like really settle. I like to sort of wander as a writer. So I need a couple of hours to sort of dream and I kind of get lost in it. I know when I go in to write, I'm at my studio now and it's like, I work best in the morning. So I come out here 7:30. Sometimes I'll take the kids to school and then come here, but I know that like, I'm not going to answer my phone for 4 or 5, like at least that amount of time to kind of like actually have anything that I know if I like, or to develop it enough to where you could finish it at some point. I think I go in phases of that. I mean, it's not like when I'm tired from the road, that doesn't happen though. I would say like there's a restful thing about me being out here by myself. So I kind of use that in a way. It's like at the end of last year when we got done, I took a day or two off, but then I just started coming in here. And I feel like there's something about me being in the process and there's a joy to it to me that maybe some people like to work out or whatever it is. Like to me, there's like, if I just get in here and it's frustrating some days, but a lot of days I'm just like laughing out loud and like, I'm being a kid in here. I can be a better parent in the afternoon and, husband, all that stuff. I can answer the management call much nicer, all that stuff. It's like the writing does feed it in a way for me, or at least it's gotten to be like that. So yeah, I try not to, just like anything with writing, you just try not to put pressure on it. I used to be much more like that. I played football in college. It was very like type A driven, sort of like, and some of that stuff would apply to this and it would always mess it up. So I feel like I have to get in that more childish thing to like be in a good spot to do it. I don't know if that answers the question. That's kind of like for me, the flow of it kind of works like that. And I write too much. That's more of the problem than the opposite. I know that's true with some people and I've been around people, that's the way their process is. But, it'll be 150 songs a year probably, even if I'm just writing by myself.
Wow.
My frustration with art is more that you can't get it all out there. I don't have a place to put it. I'm enjoying it so much. Like I wish there were avenues to do all those things. So, I've already got 2 projects. So it's not like I can just be, I think I want to make a record, just like, whatever. So that's more of my, I don't know, constant frustration with the art part of it.
Having 2 projects, what comes first? Are you thinking of the project before you write, or does the song come and then you kind of parse out where it fits?
I kind of do it in periods, probably in cycles in a way, not intentionally, but just naturally. You turn a record in, whatever it is now, the vinyl and everything, 4 or 5 months before it comes out. And I feel like, okay, all these things have been funneling into this project. And, in the Need to Breathe thing, it's a band that I'm sort of playing the songs to. So it's almost like they're A&R in a way.
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean? So it's like I'm playing them stuff. Like, we're having demo days where I just like lock them in here and make them listen. We kind of go through that whole process. Once it gets picked, these songs are, even if the record's not finished tracking wise, my mind just switches to the other one. And I start thinking about it in terms of, and I've always written better when I think about albums instead of songs.
Yeah.
I think it just started that way. Where it's, this is a certain number of ballads and these kind of, so almost a place to explore. Like, I need more up tempo. What could that look like? And that kind of helps me have a jumping off point. And occasionally, I think in both sides of the project, I'll write a song that at the end of the day, I'll go, whoa, that turned into something that is probably for the other project. But I'm not driving it that way. But for some reason, if I'm in that mindset, it kind of lends itself to that project a little bit more.
Yeah. Hearing what you were saying there about having like the structure of an album in mind while you're writing or a project. And then also what you mentioned about coming from playing football, that being more alpha and trying to like force things. Like I grew up playing soccer and did all that, but I've always been like really structurally minded as well. And I've found that if I'm like really alpha and intentional about a framework, I can then let go, be more fluid and kind of playful in the creativity. You know what I mean? So it's be tangible on like the schedule, on the facts, on the putting ink to paper on a calendar kind of thing. Really opens up the rest of the things, because being a parent, it's like you have this time to be creative and you kind of show up and play. And
totally. For me, COVID was the craziest time to learn like when I was creative. I just never had paid attention to it even. We had been going for, 15 years at that point, something like that, more. It was just like, I never had a time like, okay, I'm sitting down in the studio to write and I have nothing to write for. And honestly, it turned into like my favorite. I loved that whole process. I've gone back to the band, just put a song out that I wrote during that time that like was just sitting there, those kind of things. Because I was sometimes days would be like, I'm just going to write, a dumb country song today because, because I hate those. Would it be cool if, you know what I mean? Or whatever. Yeah. it was such a great process, like what you learn about what you like and don't, and all the different kind of musical things. But I learned a little bit of that early morning thing was a real deal changer for me. Even when I go into writes now, after 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, like lyrics are not a thing. There might be an idea, but in terms of like actually getting under the hood with a lyric, like it would take me 10 times as long as opposed to that first like spurt of caffeine and whatever it is, like in the morning for me is like the moment. And it's funny because y'all know in Nashville, everybody starts to write at 11. You know, with kids, like a whole day has happened by that time. You know, so I'm always like, I'm either going to write this before I get there or we're going to start a little earlier or something because I really need that prime window. So I feel like I learned that during the COVID thing has been super helpful to me. And it frees me from that. There's like this nagging thing, like when I'm going to bed at night, you know, if I get the kids down or whatever, I used to have this thing of like, have I done enough today? Maybe I should go out there and write till 3, like the kids do, you know, or whatever. You know what I mean? Like maybe LA really knows what they're talking about. I don't know. And I would do that some and just realize like that's not effective at all. I just didn't get any good sleep and now I'm a wreck. I feel like I learned some of that during that time. I was forced to learn it.
We've lived in Nashville for 10 years. We moved here from New York City and we both went to a jazz school and we weren't in the co-writing world. And so it was new to me when I first moved here. And I remember like going to a write and like spending all day like hanging out writing. We'd go to lunch. Then like in the afternoon, we went to like a publisher party at Music Row. And then we were like, let's grab some dinner and let's go write some more. And like finally finish the song at like midnight. And I'm just like, that life is so far gone. Like,
yeah, totally.
I'm like, we got like 3 hours until I have to go pick up my kid from school. And in a way, I'm so glad that I had that experience, and then that experience will come back again when I'm older if I want it to. These conversations and a lot of things I think about is always kind of like how we create. In a way, I feel like having the structure is helpful to be like, let's get down to business, but also knowing maybe it won't get finished and we do need to go home and have our dinner with our family and put the kids to bed. And then all of a sudden, like that line that you couldn't think of today comes to you while you're like brushing your teeth. It's so ethereal and mysterious. There's no formula. So it's interesting to just think about. I think we can romanticize the like artist's way of just going with the flow and writing all day and whatever. And I think structure is actually really helpful too. And honoring that is okay.
I totally agree. I always feel like you said there is a mysticism that goes into the writing for me. But I think some of the stuff that you're talking about, like we think of the artist way of the all day, whatever, it's like somewhere that got written in a book or something, like somewhere, you know, it's not really like when I go back to like a Dylan, you know, he's like, well, I got into a hotel room for 3 days and just finished the record, you know, or whatever. It's like, it doesn't matter how you do it. It doesn't matter where you're at. And so I think there's a thing, certainly when I moved to Nashville, I wasn't used to the co-write thing either. Looking at it, it just felt like everybody writes the best from 11 to 4. Like, I don't think that's true. You know, it's like, can somebody not speak up and say like, this sucks, you know? Like,
wait a minute here. Maybe we should turn the fluorescent lights off.
I don't know what, just so crazy to me. I know that systems get made and there's writers in town. That's all they do. And I get that. But sort of, I feel like some of my best relationships with writers has turned into that thing where like, I might call them at 1 or 2 in the afternoon and be like, hey, I got this thing started. What are you doing? You know, and it's like, come over for an hour or two. Let's just like knock this out. That works better for me in a way. And even if I'm writing a couple a week, maybe that's more my schedule of like with other writers, I'm taking in a ton of material. Whether that's good or bad, that's just like what has made the percentages different to me and also made it feel like these are songs that I could cut like they came from me. The first writer I ever went to in Nashville, we go in there and this lady goes, you know, we're like introducing ourselves, whatever. She's like, I do titles. And I was like, I'm looking around like, what? You know? And she's like, yeah, I do. I just do titles. And I'm like, how does that work? You know? So she goes, so then so she reads down this notepad of titles and like pauses after waiting for, I guess, connections. But it sounded like she's reading like movie titles from the 80s or something, you know, like Superpower. And then she just paused for a while. Anyway, I was like, and now, you know, honestly, if somebody brings that in, like I had a song on a Waterways record, y'all know Natalie Hemby. we're messing with a song for a couple of hours, and she goes, I had this title forever that I like thought it should be in a song, and it was Supply and Demand is what it was.
Oh, cool.
And it became a Waterwood song. It's like, maybe it can work. I think the stranger it is, the more you're like open to it. I just think at the time, I just was like, this is crazy to think somebody's going to have a third of this song because they wrote whatever it is.
Oh, and that's all she did. She was like, I just provide the title. Whoa.
Yeah, you guys pick, and then, I'll see you at the Grammys or whatever. I don't
Wild.
Yeah.
I do feel like thinking about genres, it's such a country thing to be like, the title is the hook, is the catch,
Mm-hmm.
Where also like we went to a jazz school. So it was like everything was the weirder you could get.
Yeah.
And the title that like makes no sense. And then coming to Nashville being like, why would you do that? If somebody hears the song, you want them to know what the title is just from their intuition. Like there's so many different ways to do this.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I grew up in that like 90s alternative, like it was really alternative, kind of like the stuff was just weird. And so that's always, for a long time I approached it that way. And it was like, oh, the title didn't have to be in the song even. Like, why would we have that?
Yes.
Let's just make it, it's like you want people to think you're an artist,
Yes.
Yeah.
I did like a little bit like of a look back of like songs that had been successful over the last 15 years or whatever. And I was like, oh, I think maybe the title does sometimes matter. It's interesting that I like went in there. I didn't think of it as the title at the time, but I had an idea for the song. Like I always say, a window into the house. How can I describe this somehow? And anyway, so I've like been taught a lesson there.
Man, I guess I've never really thought of it that way. It is like, especially now with streaming, when you look at somebody's artist page on whatever it is, Tidal or Apple or Spotify, like you just see, top songs. You're basically just window shopping. So you're like,
yeah, totally.
What's that? That's a cool name.
No, that sounds cool. And probably the lesson of writing with other people has been the thing that opens you up to that more. It's just that you see other people's process and how they approach it. And I did a thing with Anderson East a couple years ago where me and him were just writing, and he wanted me to sing and play the demo after the thing or whatever, but I'm not great on piano. So it was like, I can only play this in like 2 keys. And I'm like all nervous. And I was just doing that without even knowing I was doing it. This is having this crazy pressure on the demo now. And I just was approaching it so aggressively. And he's like, dude, it's just music. What are you talking? Like, stop. He's like, just sing it and play it.
Yeah.
And literally, I think that comes into my mind like all the time now when I'm in there. I feel my whole body tensing up. Like, I'm really got to get this,
Yeah.
Y'all know Daniel Toshian probably. I remember he has this gag where like, all the writers have a gag that they do that gets tense or whatever. But his is like screams out in the middle of nothing. It's silence. He's like, God, we're never going to get this. Everybody kind of melts,
Yeah.
I was like, so those kind of I feel like from other writers has really helped me a ton of like, you don't even realize your body is so driven by that need to like do a thing. The less I'm like that, the better, probably. The more I'm writing it come to me. So
with co-writing, especially if you're in a room with writers that you really admire. And I notice if my brain isn't focused on the song, it's more focused on, oh my God, I have to think of something really quick. And, oh, I wonder if they think I'm not contributing enough or I'm too slow. And then it's like, well, now I'm never going to think of anything because I'm so consumed with how I'm performing and how they're judging me. And I don't really think that way about the writers when I'm writing with people, but it immediately blocks your ability to flow as soon as you start getting self-conscious and trying to like push it.
You put editor in the front of the class and it's like, no, that needs to move to the back.
Yeah.
I love people that come in and they have those little things like you were saying that Daniel has about like kind of just blowing off steam or something that like, whether it's actually being explicit about like, we're all feeling the same thing or just some little joke thing. It's like, we're all in this together. Like we're all like excavating our brains and our hearts at the same time and being really vulnerable and like kind of a weird process.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. It's kind of silly thing to be doing with adults.
Yeah.
I noticed too, like I would going to these writes and I would sit in the same chair for 7 hours or whatever it was, not, like lunch. I'm like, I'm good. I just would like, I was so driven toward that thing. I realized like just walking around makes you better, the old Paul Simon thing about the tennis ball or whatever. I just think all of that plays such a bigger role. I mean, I'm big on the sort of, y'all know War of Art, that book was a big change for me just because I just am such in a hurry. And I would get in here in the morning and just kind of like start going before I looked at anything around the room or any of that. I have a candle burning now, those kind of things. Like I come in and just sort of prepare the space a little bit. It's crazy, like the difference it makes to me now, all those kind of things. So like the more I can lean into the weirdness in terms of that. The more I get in that space faster, I guess, and just feel like, oh, it's just the right mindset for this.
One of the reasons I also love getting to have these conversations, because we had Mary Gaucher on, who she talked about how she has to create the space for her to write. She's like, my writing days, I don't answer emails. And also talked about how slow her process was, that she was like, I'm not going to write a song in 3 hours, like the way that Music Row dictates it. She's like, I need to go to a co-write. We can talk, have some ideas. Then I need to come back a different day. Or Rodney Crowell, we saw him at a dinner and I was talking to him about coming on this podcast. And he was like, yes, after next week, because I'm going to go somewhere for a little bit. And I was like, where are you going? And he was like, I need a retreat. Then when he came on the podcast, he shared he wasn't physically going somewhere. He was mentally retreating, meaning he was just going to turn off and be in his own house
walk
and
in his land,
walk. Yeah. Right. And he was like, those things are really important to me. And I was like, so when you were going somewhere, you were going somewhere.
Yeah, totally.
And so hearing from people like them who were like, oh yeah, I have to do all of this stuff to create. I'm not just churning out songs nonstop. I have to create the emotional and even physical space and mental space to create. And then also hearing from them, they don't love everything that they write. They're like, my success rate is maybe 30, 40%. Or, our favorite story is that Rodney Crowell had a huge hit with Shame on the Moon, Bob Seger. 30 years later, Rodney's like, I'm still not sure about that third verse.
That third verse is still not there.
Totally.
He's like, I think I might have it now. I don't know. We'll see in a couple of years.
Yeah. So hearing from people who obviously create a lot of quality work and then have outside success, hearing from others just what everyone's process is and how much it does take is reaffirming every time I hear it, even when you are a writer, of just oh, right, these expectations we have on ourselves, people who are producing at a high level, they also have those expectations and have continually learned ways to care for themselves and their work.
For sure. And that's hard. I mean, I think that I've just been doing it long enough, which is nice to kind of learn some of those things I just didn't have at all at the beginning. You talk about the producer and studio stuff. The band is in this situation all the time where it's oh, we've got 7 days in the studio, so let's work from 10 to whatever. And you realize how ineffective that is if you don't cut out for dinner. I work with this guy, Jim Scott. He's an engineer. He was Rick Rubin's guy for a long time. He did that Wildflowers, Tom Petty record, which always has been my benchmark for the way a record should sound. It's simple.
For sure.
So we went out to outside of LA. He had a studio and we did a record there. And he was the most the dude from Big Lebowski. He was just we got a hot band, we got a hot studio. And he'd say stuff he's so let's get in there, let's just, make some magic. And we play a track 3 times, live take it 3 times. He's like, all right, you guys take a break. Let me put a hot mix together. And he had this whole setup where you listen to records and eat peanuts and whatever. And we're just hanging out. We come back in there, it sounds great. We're like, oh, I think maybe. And he's like, we're going to have lunch and dinner. Everybody's going to sit down. He had another room you went to. Everybody sits around the table. We just talk. And I always felt this sort of antsiness a little bit about oh, we're spending a lot of money out here. I think this 2-hour lunch could, let's go, But looking back on that, you're like, man, it was just insane the work we got done in a short period of time because people's real focus and just, taking yourself seriously in the process. You're not this machine. I think that's a hard thing even for me to do. Just kind of remind, you hear actors talk about it being connected to humanity in a way. That becomes harder and harder as you kind of understand what the process looks like. But I'm working on a record that's going to be a single. I'm going to have to shoot a video and I'm going to have to promote that for 2 years. And I'm going to have to, he's you get so far ahead of yourself. Whereas in the early days, you're just maybe somebody will listen to this.
Right.
I think, which is a freeing thing.
For sure. On that, I kind of want to talk about you starting Wilder Woods and having an actual project, skin in the game, side project from Need to Breathe. I know the pandemic kind of shifted your creativity process. Does having this touring, record releasing side project, solo project, how has that shifted your creativity?
I'm still figuring it out as the cycle of when to do it and how to do it. I would say that I was starting to write songs that were not Need to Breathe in the sense we even put some out. I was this is the best material I've written. I loved it the most. Who cares about success and all that? But just if I met somebody and they said, play your best song, I'd play this one. And we would put it out under the Need to Breathe thing. And it's Nobody liked it. And it's because, it's like you think you're getting ice cream, you get something else. It's like, that's what basically that was. And so that is what really started me thinking like, I really need a place to put this stuff if I love it. And then the collaboration for it was also an interesting thing after having been in a band so long. Like, I really like the process of working out a thing with musicians around. I'm not a visualizer or can't hear the whole song before it's done. I'm more of a feeler. And so I really like to be in the room as we're working it out. Try this, break the rules here, do this, like get the whole band working. And so I like directing that whole process. And that had gotten not stale, but just like it kind of gotten used to what we were doing in the band. So Wilderwood's thing is totally different in that way. But in terms of like the cycles of touring and all that, it's kind of crazy, to be honest with you. I don't have that sort of diva-ish thing. It's not like going down to, we're on 3 buses on the Need to Breathe thing. It's 1 bus on the Wilderwoods, and there's way less people to take care of you and all this, the food's not as good or whatever. So I can kind of put up with that stuff for the most part. But I do think it's tough when the audiences are smaller, or you kind of find like, man, this is, we're on the 3rd record now. You're going out and playing clubs that are like, gosh, I mean, this is like, I feel like this stuff's great. And it's just, which I know everybody feels at the beginning of projects, or maybe the whole time, but there's been more of that feeling of, man, this is really hard to get people to listen to this stuff like it's not the guy from Need to Breathe.
Yeah, how to stand on its own feet.
Yeah. And it's like, I called it Wilderwoods because of that. I was like, don't call it your name or whatever. And that's also like backfired because people come up all the time. It's like, oh, I love Wilderwoods. I just didn't know it was you. I'm like, well, I've really marketed this horribly, obviously. The hardest thing has been like festivals and stuff will be like, can Need to Breathe play on Friday and Wilderwoods play on Saturday? I'm like, it's a completely different band and different song. Like the idea that I can play a 2-hour set 2 days in a row, they're completely different. I'm not that good. I'm not getting my head turned into the other thing.
Also the logistics of like...
Oh, it's insane. 1 guitar player plays in both things. Everything else is different. It's kind of chaos. So switching over to the Wilderwoods thing, the first couple of weeks of a tour are the toughest in terms of, it's hard to explain, like you physically feel a certain thing. Like Need to Breathe is sort of a tasteless rock and roll band. That's the way I would describe it. Like everything's on 10 all the time. If it's acoustic, you play as hard as you can. That's just what we did when we came up, and that's what we still do. And Wilderwoods is like the opposite of that. Like how back can the pocket be, and how subtle can a thing be, and how much is about the groove and everything. When you get on stage, the Wilderwoods things just feels slow to me. Like I'm so used to coming out like raging that I get into the 80 BPM thing, and I'm like, what is like this first song took an hour, So it takes me a week or so to get settled into like, oh, this is a different thing. But for me, the expectation like sinking into it.
Yeah.
So I'm probably in that now that we've got a couple of weeks in, I'm like totally switched over. But if I had to go do the Need to Breathe thing tomorrow, like it would be a wreck too, So that's probably when I'm talking to management and all those things. They're like, could you do this? I'm like, maybe, but it's like a one-offs and stuff like that. I think keeping it at least in its own windows is probably the better thing for my health. And I hate the idea too of like cheapening the Wilderwoods thing just because Need to Breathe has got this big offer somewhere or whatever it is. So we're kind of, figuring that out.
Yeah. I hear you saying like, basically you started the Wilderwoods to have an outlet for these songs that you had. And you're like, what is this? I was kind of interpreting what you're saying is it was like a little bit of a playground project where it's like, I have these songs that I love. Does it still feel that way?
It does.
Cool.
It does. It feels less, the first record, everything just had to be different. That was like maybe an obstacle that I put in there that I shouldn't have, but it was just always at the top of my mind. I was like, if it's anything like Need to Breathe, then I don't want it. I feel like song-wise, that's not the best process, obviously. Now it feels more me. The newest record just feels like this is what I like, and it's different than the band, sure, but it's still something I would write again. If this was the only project I was doing right now, I think this is what it would sound like. So I kind of let that be like the Wilderwoods thing is less of a collective. It feels more like, okay, this is what I love, and really I'm just going to live and die by that. The band thing is more democracy. Yes, I'm going to bring something that's my thing that I love, but I'm going to let y'all, we've always said, like if Zeppelin didn't have one of the members, are they Led Zeppelin? So you try to treat the band thing with that sort of respect of like, everybody's got to have an opinion, even if you think their opinion sucks. You have to figure out how to get everybody on the same page. Wilderwoods thing is more free like that, but it's nice now, at least there's songs on there that probably could go through the filter of Need to Breathe and make it on those records. And I don't feel like that's a bad thing. Like they're just, if I want to make the songs, I should make the songs.
Is there ever any crossover live, or do you keep Need to Breathe songs Need to Breathe?
There's a song or two of Wilderwoods that I'm always like, man, we play like an acoustic set and the Need to Breathe set. I was like, maybe
Yeah.
we should play this song. It would be perfect. But we haven't done that. And I think that's a tricky road to go down. We did a tour with One Republic a couple of years ago, and Tedder did like a whole thing in the middle of him playing his other songs that he had written.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very entertaining, but I kind of hated it too.
Yeah.
You know, I like Tedder, so it's not, but just I could feel like this thing of like the audience being like, well, I thought I came to see like,
Yeah.
oh, that's impressive. I didn't know that. But it's also like, wait, what show are we at? I just felt like a flow of what that album is trying to say and that night is supposed to be about. So I think I'll keep it like that at least for a while. I always have this dream that like when I turn 60, I'll be able to go out and do my own thing, like in theaters. I would love to do that. Whatever songs I've written my whole life, no matter where they go, just play the stuff I want to play that night. But we're not there yet. So someday.
It's so interesting of, again, like the relationship of the business aspect of like, okay, these are the songs we got to play because this is the audience. And then also like the artistic creative fulfillment, which I think is hard for some people to understand of like, okay, I've been doing these songs though for 15 years and I'm like not feeling fulfilled by it anymore. And I think your nervous system, everything becomes relative, right? So like playing arenas, I have never done that, but I would imagine you get used to it. Like you said, like that once you like get off of the Need to Breathe stuff, everything feels like slower and calmer doing Wilder Woods and your nervous system is probably trying to acclimate. I'm curious how, when you say, you know, you're playing smaller rooms, are you having kind of those same expectations for Wilder Woods of, okay, how do I get this to the level?
They're not the same. Like I've always been, I think because when the band started, I was like the one guy into the business side of it and sort of the leadership side of it. And every band has to have that. I don't care how artistic you are. Like you can't, unless you can bring the 5 guys together or 4 or 10 or whatever it is. So I've always had that in the Wilder Woods, but it's very different in terms of the goals. Part of the reason to do it, you know, Need to Breathe doesn't normally tour with the bands. Maybe we have openers that are like this, but we're not going to get an opening slot on a band that I listen to. You know, it's just the way it is. Like, so I was like, man, it would be really fun. Wouldn't it be cool if like when I went out and collaborated, the bands that I actually love and listen to and respect were kind of the circle that we were in. So there's an element of that goal of like, what kind of size do you have to be to get invited to do that and whatever. And then the other thing is I think it just needs to be viable. And that's gotten harder and harder. That's a longer conversation on the business side of music. It's just more expensive. And like, it's pure insanity to me that people can start out, especially in bands that like, you know, you can go out with a bus and sell out every room and not make any money. So I think there's a level of that. I never thought about like the Wilder Woods. I just can't imagine in arenas or anything. But I think that sort of, you know, like the Tabernacle in Atlanta, that 2,500 kind of club / theater sort of thing is like the magic. So I would love that. I'm playing the Ryman on this tour with Wilder Woods for the first time. So like if all the shows could be like that, I'd call it a success. You know what I mean? So it definitely is different. It's not as much world domination, I think, with the Wilder Woods thing. But I do think it keeps you kind of driven and into it and disciplined in a certain way. I've just seen with kids now, it's like they're so TikTok dependent. They have no control of their live thing. They have no sense of like what we used to have. Like I was always like, look, if you play in front of 200 people in a club, if you want it to be 300 next time, you better be amazing. If anybody leaves there and says, that was pretty good, they're not coming back. What it takes to get actual people to be like, I'm going next year to that is just a crazy high bar. And so I think having that's always helped me kind of when you're in the third night in a row and it's like half full, you know, the crew's kind of feeling it too. And everybody, I really enjoy trying to like challenge the people that are around us to be like, dude, these couple hundred people, whoever it is, like it's the first time they're seeing this. And hopefully there's a kid out there who's 16 like I was when I saw Ben Harper and the Innocent Criminals, and I thought that my world could never be like that. You know, this sort of wonderment. Like you want to create that and you got to do it night in, night out. So I think part of that, you know, drive of getting there. The other thing is my success gauge has always been about artistic freedom. The truth is, it's just really hard to decide, like, I want to work with this producer. If you haven't done enough or you don't have the budget to make that record, you don't get to. So it's always been that thing to me of like, yeah, I would love to have these musicians play with me. That means you're taking a bus because these guys are not going in a van. There's like some reality that has to set in.
I love that you brought up gauge for success. You know, that's something we say, you know, this industry that we're in, we all know really well, like 90% of this industry is completely out of our control. What is within our control is our creativity, our artistic integrity, and like what we put out. I'd love to ask that of our guests is like, how do you gauge success, year over year? Because sure, you can look at ticket sales, you can look at album sales and all that, but like at the end of the day, it's not in your control, no matter how much you think it is, no matter how many thousands of dollars you pay a publicist every month.
Right. Yeah. Totally.
They'll be the first ones to tell you, like, we'll pitch these people, but who knows?
Well, who knows? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, and one of the things we talk a lot about is also knowing where you want to be, knowing if my goal is to be able to play arenas, what does that path look like? And what do I need to be willing to do to try to get there? Or do I think that that's my goal because we just think that that's the utmost level of success? Or is my real goal to be able to play small clubs or to be able to play the Ryman-sized room around the country? And what does that look like? I think that's really helpful to be able to know, like, also, oh, my music fits better in this space. That's been a process for me of thinking like, oh, I should just try to be bigger and bigger. I'm like, oh no, actually I'm like a folky storyteller. That doesn't really come across in a rowdy room of thousands of people when you're an opener. Like I actually do a lot better in like a room of 200 to 500 people. And recognizing that, and also recognizing on the financial side, oh, you can make a living doing that, but then maybe you aren't going to be on a bus and you're not going to have like this whole crew. You're going to have a slimmer team, and like just being able to navigate all of that stuff, like matching your artistic vision with financial and business realities, I think is like really helpful and something you just learn along the way. And I think conversations like this help you understand that of, oh, okay, that's what that's like.
Yeah. I'm trying to think through Drew Holcomb is a buddy. It's like a good example of somebody who, like, when I met him, was just begging to get on a tour kind of thing. Didn't have a lot going on, but he always had a very clear idea of what he wanted to do and how he wanted to do it. It's taken longer than he wanted probably, but it's started to happen. It's like, I don't think I know anybody that's been doing it for, let's call it over 15 years, 10, 15 years, that hasn't had to have that conversation with themselves very seriously. It's different. I think younger, newer artists like can get this like overnight thing. And then it's just now the journey's like pulling them. They're not like dictating it at all. But I think most people that have been around long enough at some point forces like, okay, I've got a buddy writer who's always talking about, he's like, I try to think about what I want to be like in 10 years and not what I want to be like next year.
Yeah.
And I think that's like it's a hard thing for a young person to do, I would imagine. But like for me, that's such a great, okay, what does this look like in 10 years? And am I going to be okay with that in the trajectory I'm going? Is this actually going to look like that? Is this livable? Do I want to do that? Do I want to be gone this much? Or all those kind of things? Yeah. Good questions to ask.
You're saying you don't think the Wilder Woods would ever be an arena band. It just got me thinking about like venues and like where you present your music. You know what I mean? It's like we were talking to Tyler Ramsey, who is a great writer, used to be in Band of Horses. He was saying, he knows that his solo music is not meant to be big festival stages, all of that. This was months ago they're talking, but like thinking about like really the venue is like the frame around the piece of art. It's like
no doubt.
You can have a great piece of art and you put a horrible frame on there and it kind of ruins both. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's like one day Wilder Woods is big enough to sell out Bridgestone, but you could just choose to do 5 nights at the Ryman. Or do what Jason Isbell does. And, pretty soon it's going to be Jason Isbell presents February at the Ryman.
Yeah, totally right. Yeah, totally. I've always been the biggest nuisance to a booking agent. And it's because of that. I've always just like, God, I want to play the place in town people want to go see a show. But also my fans want to see. I mean, it's like you have to consider all that kind of thing. It's like the Need to Breathe thing's been going so long. It's like nobody wants to. Me personally, I don't want to go stand up at a show for 4 hours.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's not because I don't love music. I'm inspired by it more than ever. And I go see a ton of shows. But if I got to stand there for 4 hours, just once a year, I'm doing that. And so when you book a venue, it's the same thing. It's like, are there people like you who love this music because you made it because you love it? Do they want to come and go through that? Or would they rather have a place to park? Or whatever. So I would get on them about theaters that had white walls. It's like, we can't play in any theaters that have white walls. We're bringing all this production, and the lights from the stage now make this whole room bright. Now everybody's insecure about being in there. They feel uncomfortable. We're uncomfortable. I was like, they're out. So they're like, so our agent is just probably hates us. I don't know. But I do think that it's like you can bring all this stuff onto a stage, but a venue, I mean, we all know it's like you go to these what feels like a magical place. And if the music fits that room, there's nothing better than that. And you also have seen acts that like don't belong in a place. And you're like, this is totally wrong. So I agree with you.
You're giving your audience, you're giving these people an experience. The whole night is an experience to them.
Yeah.
You know, walking into the venue, like all of that.
Yeah, and I think do you know Aaron Lee Tasjan?
Yeah.
Years ago when we first moved to town, Aaron had like a album release show, and this Aaron played drums with him, and Aaron Lee Tasjan is a good friend. But I remember going to the show, and it was at the original basement, the very small little basement, which is a small venue, like maybe 100 cap.
Yeah, 120 maybe.
Yeah.
And it was packed. And I remember like feeling like it was just one of those shows that was so magical and fun. And part of it was the fact that we were like so squished together in this communal experience. And I remember thinking, and this is like no diss on the basement east, like, but that's a much bigger room. And I've seen so many shows there, and I've played shows there. It's just like a bigger space. So it always is inevitably like the back people are like talking or like going to the bar. And I remember very vividly being like, oh, this show would feel different if it was in a big venue, even if that big venue was sold out, just like the chatter that happens, the bar happening. There are so many elements to consider when putting on a show, when presenting your music, that I think we can overlook and just constantly think bigger is better. And I think that's why the Ryman is such a special place, not because it's huge. It's because of the way the room is set up, how it looks,
Everybody's
the
right
wood.
there.
Yeah.
I don't play nearly as many shows as I used to, but like I grew up playing DIY shows and playing little tiny things where it's like there is no stage and like the audience is right there. You're all in it together, and the band's energy goes up and the audience's energy, and like you feed off each other, and it creates this thing. And it's like I still think that's super fun. So like bringing up the OG basement or a place like that, or even like what Jack White was doing with his band like last year, where they get in a van and they drive themselves and they play like a tiny rock club. Like I'm sure that was a bunch of fun for them.
Oh, there's no doubt. I don't think there's anything better than that small club feel, whatever, if it's more rock or more intimate or whatever it is. When the energy starts going back and forth like that, my feet are not on the ground anymore. I'm in some other planet. And that is so hard to do. That's why I have respect for those people that you watch the Springsteen do it in an arena. You're like, the skill level to do that and how you've done that over the years. I mean, it's incredible. It's a different art form. Pearl Jam was a great example. I went and saw Pearl Jam and the Killers 2 nights in a row at Bridgestone. Just randomly, because I was like, it'd be interesting to see like the two different approaches. Pearl Jam's no click, you know, just wedges. They're playing the looses. I mean, everything's too fast. You know, it's like, and they're calling the set list, you know what I mean? Stuff that you would know as a musician, but the people are so into it. They had the lights on for like the last 4 or 5 songs in the arena. And it felt so communal. All of a sudden, I was like, I feel like I'm in a bar, and I'm somehow it's 15,000 people. I'm like, this is insane. Like how they figured out how to do it. And then the Killers, you know, just is a totally opposite theatrical kind of Vegas-y thing. It's refreshing, I guess, to me. To like, I walked away from those 2 shows going like, oh, I saw Tame Impala in that same period of time. There, you know, it's like, and I can't see the band the entire time. And it still was like, I felt like I was on a drug trip for 2 hours. It was like, the fact that music can be experienced in so many different ways, but in all great ways, you know, does say that. I think it's knowing what you're trying to do in that night. And it's nothing worse than an intimate band trying to be like, you know, arena or vice versa.
For sure. Yeah. Is knowing your thing and leaning into it. Like,
totally.
Fully. You know, that's that subconscious thing about music and about shows that like you just feel. Whether you know anything technical about music or putting on a show, it's you know, what makes the stew happen.
No doubt.
Yeah.
And the relationship between the audience and the performer, that it's not just one-sided. Again, like we talk about all the different things that are out of our control, and you can control how you perform, but you can't control how the audience is going to receive you or what energy they're going to give back to you. And so like navigating that is a whole other art form as well.
No doubt. That's well said. It's a major challenge. You start putting pressure on the audience. That's probably where I get in the most trouble. Because it's night to night. You sort of have this expectation for the energy level and those kind of things. And when I don't have that, I will have this huge feeling like I failed, you know, and I'll walk off, and then my wife will be like, that was the best show on the tour. Like I was just looking for this other relationship to happen, and I didn't know that it was happening. I was giving it everything, but like that's a challenge for me, like to just really lower it. Like I tell the band all the time, let it go where it wants to go. Like do not have an anticipation before it. Like don't be thinking about song 8 at song 1. Like enjoy the moment in that song, and then like let it play. And maybe I'm getting better at it, but it's still very difficult.
It really is. That reminds me of I guess it's kind of a Buddhist story or something like that. I can't remember exactly where I heard it, but let's just say like this emperor takes 2 of his philosophers, his thinkers, and sends them away to islands for a couple months and has them think and study and do all that, and then calls them back. and asked about their experience. And one was like, it was amazing. Everybody was like so open and welcoming. We had a great community, and like, we had all these ideas. One was just like, I didn't meet anybody. It was cold. The whole process was very arduous, very telling. And then come to find out they were sent to the same island, and it was just their headspace,
Yeah, no question.
We like to be wary of our time and grateful that you've taken so much time. We end all these
flew by.
It did. It did. We like to end these conversations with kind of the same question of kind of choose your own adventure. Either something that you would tell younger you that's just getting into this business, or something that somebody has told you along the way that has just kind of resonated with you and carried you through.
I mean, there's so many that come to mind. I'm just so old. So I'm careful about teaching it. It's like, and I love the experience of meeting young artists. I love talking to them backstage about what they're going through, like not to worry about those things and this thing. It's very simple. I think for me though, having trust that you wouldn't have it any other way. I got too just worried about results. I didn't trust that this was going to go where it was supposed to go. And I think I could boil it pretty much down every time to like, do I trust this or not trust this? And I have no say in whether it works out or not, or where it goes. And I have all the say in just like what the experience is like. And so I think that to me is probably a lesson I'll learn forever, in this business. I think that expectation and real disappointment, and so much of it was internal.
Yeah.
Like where we were at was internal and not actually with results. It was actually going way better than I was letting it.
I love that.
Yeah, to me, that's right in line with what we were just saying. Like, experience it for what it is and enjoy it. Yeah. Well, Bear, thank you for taking time with us this morning to sit and chat.
So nice to meet you. Thank you so much.
Y'all too.
All right, man. Take care.
See ya.
Thank you to all of you who subscribe to our Patreon or on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you get our show. If you haven't subscribed yet, take a second to do that right now, and we'll see you back here next week.